Priscila, thanks so much for joining. It's really a great pleasure to see you. And let me see. I don't see you for some reason on my screen. Okay, I will start like that. Great to see you. And it was really awesome to record your recital just, less than 2 weeks ago. And, it's been a while since I heard you live, so it was really wonderful. And I am curious, many of your fans are here with us and they know about you, but there are a few people who have not heard you or have not met you. And what I'm interested in, your childhood. How did you find your way to the piano? When was the first time you heard the instrument? And if anyone plays music at home?
Yeah, so actually, many of my family members played guitar and some other Peruvian folk instruments, like wind instruments and even like percussion, like cajon. But classical music was not part of my environment growing up almost at all. And so when I was 5, my father wanted me to do some like summer class in music, and I did several instruments. I did guitar and cajon and piano, and but it was like I only had an electric keyboard, and my teacher was a teacher at an institute, and all she could teach me was the Thompson books, the beginning books. So I finished that in like a month, and I learned how to read music. And so she told my parents, like, your daughter is really talented, you should keep her in music. And then I continued kind of studying in this informal way until I was 9. And when I was 9, I moved, my family and I moved to Lima. And in Lima has the National Conservatory of Music, which is now a University of Music. Mm-hmm. And there I entered and I studied with Professor Lydia Hung, who was my teacher for 7 years and who I still am in contact with. And she pretty much taught me everything I needed to know about piano and music in general. She took me to concerts. She would like teach me how to dress for concerts, and just really took me as like a musical mother figure to help me, because it's really hard for students when classical music or in general academic music is not part of their environment. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
So there is a conservatory in Lima, but then when you go outside of Lima, are there any music schools, or it's mostly private teachers?
So it has started to change a little bit. It used to be that the only professional orchestra in Peru was in Lima. Mm-hmm. And there are actually several orchestras in Lima and some concert series. But in the last 10 years or so, there has been a growth of music in general in the country of Peru. So now there are 5 professional orchestras in Peru throughout the provinces, and I've performed with most of them. Mm-hmm. And even my hometown, which is Huánuco, is about 9 hours northeast of Lima towards the Amazon. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, there was a music and arts school, but they didn't even have like a grand piano or a concert hall. So, but now they do. So they bought a grand piano, and they built somewhat of a concert hall. And so now I've gone back and I've done like recitals, and I've played with chamber orchestras and different things. And it's been really wonderful to see the growth and interest in music as a serious profession, which I think it was not often taken as such before.
Incredible. And what do you feel, what made that trigger that change?
I think in many ways, things like globalization, like the availability of resources throughout, because before, the internet or um, any type of online connection, if you didn't hear a live concert, you just didn't hear a concert of music. And now with the internet, you can hear pretty much anything that goes on around the world from wherever you are.
Right.
So that really made a big change, where like a lot of musicians from back home follow me online, and it's really encouraging to see their comments, and also the fact that there's been a generation of musicians in many areas, composers, violinists. Juan Diego Flores, probably the biggest, of people who succeeded in academic music and classical music, who showed that it was possible to make a living and a career out of it, because that was the biggest fear for my family too, was that it would be too difficult for somebody from my background to achieve a career in music.
Wow, that's incredible. And do you remember the time, the day when you felt this is something that I want to continue doing? I am interested in music enough to pursue a career in music.
Yeah, so from when I started, really, I really fell in love with, first of all, with the analytical side of music, with the way it's structured, the way it can be kind of taken apart and put back together, and then with the power to communicate, which to me is the most important side, besides just the aesthetic values of music, but the ability that a musician has to convey emotions and information even through music in such a powerful way. And but the problem for me was that, like I said, music was not seen as a feasible career. So it was when I was 13, my piano teacher told me that I really needed to focus on piano because I should be a pianist. And it was a little bit difficult for me because all my family are engineers, or my family members have grown up to be engineers. And I was part of a program for gifted children where we were studying from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to become engineers. And so it was very difficult for a while. Like I would go practice after I finished my school, and I would go to the conservatory because I didn't have a piano. And I would practice until they closed. And when I had like master classes or recitals, I had to ask to be excused. And it got to a point where it was not manageable. And I remember actually my physics teacher from my school, and he told me that he knew I loved math and engineering and physics, but there were many good physicists in Peru, but there were not many good pianists. And that he knew that he had seen me on TV about a concert that I had done, and he said that I just belonged there. And I think for me, that was the point where I said, okay, I'm going to give up, other careers and fully commit to music, because to me, it really was a full-time job.
Well,
So
it is absolutely the commitment and the hours of practice that we, put and the amount of energy and we spend on being a musician. And here comes my next question. What is the role of the musician in the society?
yeah.
Why are we doing what we are doing?
Yeah, well, there's many functions of music. One of it is to bring sensitivity to humanity in general. And that's why, music teachers have to continue this job, because even though with this whole pandemic and this crisis, oftentimes music has not been considered an essential job in society, at least in paper. But to me, we have really a calling to enrich the lives of people. Because while it's true that you can live without music and without arts in general, you have to question what kind of life it really would be without this ability to express, and I feel like, to me, is like a way to achieve a higher calling, something almost spiritual. And that's why I feel like we can't give up. So many of our friends are going through really difficult times, even now, with like colleges deciding when to open up and how to go about, and people questioning whether they're getting the right degrees or not. And but I think it's important that we remember why we do what we do, and doing concerts like this, and talking with people about our function in society really helps to remember that.
No, it's you make a great point. So now that you're a young person, you're just starting out in your career, really, and you're entering different competitions. You're putting yourself out there, right, for the people to hear your art, your music. Is there any particular repertoire that you feel particularly close to, and you feel that it really expresses your ideas, your personality, and who you are as an artist?
Yeah. So I've always been a lifelong devoted fan of Johann Sebastian Bach. And I think, all musicians at some point recognize just how truly magnificent and essential his work in music was. But to me, it's always been very expressive music and very human music, because a lot of times we think of Bach and we think of like God and, his devotion to his religion. But to me, actually, it's very human. What he is able to convey is every single human emotion that we experience, from total, absolute, ecstatic joy to desperation, and everything in between, through laughter and just regular, day-to-day activities. And a part of that was because my first teacher, Lydia Hung, was also a harpsichordist. And she was a big believed in how essential Bach is. So from when I was very little, I remember every single piece that I learned from Bach, and how it went from like 2-voice invention to 3-voice invention, prelude and fugue and suites. And so that I always feel. And also I like to include something of Bach in my program, preferably at first, because I feel like when we play Bach, our brain has to be so completely immersed in the process of getting through all the voices that there is no room for any other type of distraction. And that, to me, that effect also happens to the audience. Like, you just immediately become involved completely in the concert. And then besides that, like, as I've grown up, I've discovered different composers that really connect with me. One of them was when I was growing up, I played a lot of Chopin. I played almost most of Chopin's works, and I did many Chopin competitions. And I love Chopin, and I always try to include something of his. But then beyond that, Rachmaninoff, really during my graduate work, I started playing a lot of his pieces, and I find that it suits my physiology of my hands. It's just very comfortable, actually. And then kind of his personality also, because it's very emotional, also fits me well. And on the other side, I've come to really love Spanish music, which is a little bit stereotypical, you might say, for a Hispanic pianist to play a lot of Spanish music. But actually, to me, it was difficult because I am very aware of the history of my country and the role that Spain played throughout. So it was a little bit hard to accept that through all the really horrible things that happened, some good was brought to us in Spanish art. So I started studying everything that, Spain has really great, wonderful things that they have done. And I love Goya. And every time I go through Madrid, I always stop at El Prado, and I pretty much weep looking at the paintings because it's just so poignant. And in Spanish music, particularly Granados and Albeniz, I feel that spirit is just so palpable for me. And immediately I feel it's almost like it just flows out of me. I don't have to put it on or think about it too much. It's just very natural. So yeah, those are also because I feel like they're not as often played as other composers, and yet they're, to me, equally powerful. And really, Iberia and Goyescas are wonderful masterpieces, but you kind of have to understand the language to bring that out in them.
Great. Since you have such a strong interest I'm going back a little bit now, in Bach's music, have you tried exploring playing it on harpsichord and maybe organ as well?
Yeah, so when I was also young, I considered, I went to a harpsichord masterclass, and the harpsichord teacher, actually, he came to perform at FGCU a few years ago. He had me play, just experiment, and he was really impressed. And then he had me do some basso continuo and some sight reading, and he was like, wow, you really fit into the harpsichordist kind of role, so you should consider doing something of that. And I went to my teacher, and she, because she was a harpsichordist, she told me it's just a completely different instrument. A lot of times we think oh yeah, you just pick up, because it's a keyboard, any pianist can go and play the harpsichord, but it's entirely different. The keyboard might look similar, but on piano we are always thinking about how we go down, and we control the speed of the attack and the timing and the way we enter the key, and all this really little nuances that make up great pianist. But in harpsichord, there is no different way of going down. It either goes down or it doesn't. and then it's all about the way you actually take off the key and the timing in between the attacks. So it's just, yeah, I have experimented a little bit, but I never felt oh, I could just sit down and play the harpsichord because I'm a pianist. And with organ, it's always been kind of I love the organ, and I know Bach his favorite instrument was actually the organ. But yeah, again, it's just such a different instrument that I've never felt like I could do them just on a whim.
Right. What about improvisation? Have you explored that part?
Yeah. So I always, when I was growing up, I always played just for fun. I would play by ear and adapt different things of popular music or TV shows or things like that. And I found actually that was really helpful, because, for example, when we do like accompanying or collaborative work, a lot of the time some pianists struggle because you can't just play what's on the page.
Right.
You have to imagine how you can recreate the sound of the work on the piano. And sometimes you have to add things, you have to take out things. And so, yeah, I think improvisation and kind of arranging is really good for pianists, not to just play exactly what's on the page. And then when it comes to specific things like writing out Mozart cadenzas or things like that, that I really believe, every pianist should be able to. I don't think you can do a really authentic performance of Mozart and play somebody else's cadenza.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your journey to United States. Well, first of all, I want to thank Michael Barron for finding, I guess, you. At least that's the story I know. That he discovered you and then brought you here to this country. Tell me if it's not true. I don't know.
Yeah. So it really was kind of a incredible story. I finished the school when I was 15, and as I said, I had decided to be a pianist, and my teacher back then wanted me to go outside of Peru, and also my parents agreed. It was kind of like, if I'm going to be a musician, I have to prove that I can live by being a musician. And so we started looking for teachers. And actually one summer I was at Interlochen in Michigan, and Dr. Barron went to perform in Peru, and he met my teacher. And my teacher recognized that he was not only a fantastic piano teacher, but that he would be able to help me in all the developmental just aspects of being really young and coming for the first time to live in the United States and all those things. And so she kind of she told me, she spoke to him, and then she told me, you should send a video, apply to the school. So I did, and actually we didn't meet, Dr. Barron and I didn't meet until I came. So I sent a video, and that was my application.
Okay.
And there were all kinds of struggles throughout. Like, I couldn't take the SAT back home. I actually took it here while I was at Interlochen. And just at every step, like, we were able to get through the application process. And then I came when I was 16, which was still quite young. But I think my mom was comfortable enough because of how caring Dr. Barron had been throughout. Because I feel like if I had gone to just any university, with a good teacher, it's always difficult. Like, in a big university, you can kind of get lost. And then pianists, like, as musicians, we need much more than piano lessons. And I'm sure you know that, and all piano teachers know that. You don't just, teach your student how to play a Chopin sonata. You kind of guide them throughout the musician's development and the artistic professional development. And so that I was very lucky to find Dr. Barron, because even once I came, again, he kind of taught me through all the little details of preparing for competitions. He would always go with me to try out the pianos, and he had different people who were always helping with, like, even when I got sick, and I didn't have a car for a long time when I came. And yeah, we need so many things. The students really, they're kind of like your musical children, and to find a teacher who is willing and able to do that is very difficult.
That's interesting, because I also came to this country when I was 16 years old. And I don't know how you felt when you came, but for me it was a big culture shock. It was a very different environment. And did you feel that way at all? Or
Yeah. So Yeah, I was also lucky because FGCU was kind of a sheltered place. I always feel like it would have been even worse at a more bigger university. But yeah, I had Deb Dowd during the first year. I don't think many of you know her, but she was living here, and she would take me shopping and would just tell me how to interact with people throughout, because that was also very different from the way it was in Peru and the way I was used to doing things. And I used to go through FGCU. I would like take off my shoes and just run from class to class, because I was doing so many things too. I accompanied 30 people every semester, and I did competitions, and I had several programs, and I did chamber music, and yeah, I just had every opportunity that I could have had. So
Yeah, no, I actually went to high school here for 2 years.
oh wow.
So I did experience high school in Florida. I was in Sarasota. So,
Oh
so
wow, I did not know that. Yeah, I'm sure high school is an entirely different
it was a very
experience here.
traumatic experience. But I found my way, I think, after I went to New York and went to school there. And yes, then I felt like, okay, this is my environment. I understand this. I speak this language. But I had difficult time actually in high school.
Oh.
So, but anyway, it's not an interview about me. So now I understand you play with your teacher, Professor Michael Barron. You are colleagues. You perform together. And actually, Michael, if you don't mind unmuting yourself for a moment, and I am curious to know your opinion. How does it feel to play with your student, or is she a student? I mean, is she now a colleague, and you feel in a very different way?
Well, I'm so proud of Priscilla. I mean, she came when she was 16 and she stayed at FGCU for 5 years. And so, I've known her about 10 years now. So even after she left FGCU, we would stay very closely in touch. We started exploring duo piano music while she was a student, and we learned a lot of repertoire. And then after she left, she, still comes back and plays for me, tries out new programs and things like that. And we have built up more and more to piano music. We're actually going to be making a commercial recording this year, doing a Carnegie Hall recital when things get back to normal. And so it's an extreme pleasure. You can imagine bringing up a young, talented artist and until they become a mature, wonderful artist. And then we're very much the same wavelength now because we've worked together for so long that it's very easy and very quick for us to put together some rather complicated pieces. So it's a tremendous joy for me.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing your experience. Priscilla, how do you spend your days these days? What it is that you do.
Oh, well, honestly, in a way, like, in spite of all the difficult situations that we're going through, I feel like for many people it was a forced break that was almost necessary to an extent. So back in March, one thing that was very sad was that I was selected for the Liszt international competitions in the Netherlands. And I learned about 4 hours of music of Liszt that you wouldn't regularly learn just out of free will, or like you wouldn't even know some of these pieces exist. And so I had been preparing for that, and the day I was supposed to fly out, the organizer called me and said, "Don't go to the airport. We're probably gonna cancel the whole thing." So then I was in Miami, and I could see that things were gonna get very chaotic over there. So I came over here to stay with a friend, actually, in Bonita Springs. And I finished my semester because, you know, we went online, but this is my second year of DMA. So I had my qualifying exams for the doctorate. And that was difficult because the library was not open. And so, and, you know, online, there's a lot of resources, but not quite everything that you would want is online yet. So I finished my semester, and then I started exploring a lot of new repertoire. So one of my projects was this recital that I played. I had performed Goyescas already, and I've been, for a long time, I've been wanting to learn Iberia. So I took this time to really immerse myself in the world of Albanese, and I learned some other pieces too. I was scheduled to perform this summer Beethoven's Fourth Concerto and Liszt Tottenham's and Ruins of Athens. And unfortunately, all those concerts, of course, were canceled, but I still took the time to learn other pieces. And I'm really thankful that, you know, in some areas of Florida, you can still go walk outside. And, you know, at least for me, it's really important to be able to run. And just like the fresh air and nature is really inspiring. So I do that almost every day. And I've been practicing. I was just in Cleveland for 2 days pre-recording the rounds for the Cleveland online competition, which they're doing this year. And I have some other projects from now until mid-August, when we're supposed to start our semester in the University of Miami.
Well, how does it feel to you as a performing artist, and you've performed in public for so many years, to do recital like you did for us, where it was an empty hall? It's actually just a recording session. And the competition now, you've done an online competition for the performance.
Yeah, it's very different. So the recital part, you know, so much of it is really this atmosphere that you create with the audience, which I think for artists is part of what we love, is like sensing that the audience is reacting to what we're doing. And so that's not there anymore. But on the other hand, the idea that you are making this recital that people are going to be able to watch anytime throughout a period of time puts a different perspective. So it's kind of like a recording, but then it's not, because you're not, you know, setting it out as a recording. So no, it was really a wonderful experience. And also the fact that these were pieces that I hadn't performed before. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I was thankful that there was some activity, you know, because there hasn't been any recital for me, at least since March. And this was a way to reconnect with the audience. The competition, I think, is a little bit more difficult, because unless you bring everybody to the same exact place, and even then, like, it's really difficult to judge through the microphone. As good as the microphone may be, like, there are things that quite about the color and different things of the pianist that are not easily captured in a recording, you know. And then there's also, to me, like, when an artist walks on stage and sits down, there's a personality that the person has on stage, and that is also not easily captured through a video. So there's all those elements. And then, of course, for these competitions, because of travel restrictions, not everybody is going to be in the same place. Yeah. So that brings out the problem of, like, different pianos and different halls. And yeah. And also what was very sad is that I know a lot of the people who go to these competitions, and part of the joy of competitions, besides all the stress, is being able to connect with the people. And you kind of form friendships just from competitions that you see each other, twice or three times a year. And now, because of COVID, we couldn't see anybody. I mean, I didn't see a single person. So that was very sad. And it almost, takes out one of the few joys of competitions. But
well, expand on the friendships formed in competitions, because for most of the people, the idea of you're going for a competition to win, right? So you are sort of rivals, right? So now you're talking about friendships. So,
well,
explain.
I think at least for me, I've always wanted all my colleagues to do well. I wish them to have a wonderful career and to be able to express who they are, because what I really believe is we are all different. And the people who really get to be wonderful grown-up artists have a very unique personality that you cannot compare. And so, competitions in a way is like apples and oranges. Some of the people is just, you cannot compare. At the end, you kind of want to think, who would get the audience more involved is the only question that you could ask after a certain level. So I've never felt like, anybody is robbing me of my place in this, or, it's just, and the other thing is we are not in control of the results. None of the competitors. So yeah, we're just kind of in it together. And it's wonderful because all of these pianists who go to competitions are of the top level, or at least at some of these competitions, the really high level competitions is pianists that you wouldn't find all gathered at any school. So you meet people from, New York and all the, great schools of the US, and then some people who are in Europe at the great conservatories there. And so, and I don't know, I always feel like we're colleagues and we're all trying to find our place in the performing world. And I've, for example, Anna Hahn, I think she came to perform. Yes. I'd met her my first time in the US when I went to a festival in Kansas. Oh. And I was 13 years old. And we're about the same age. And then I saw her again like 10 years later at Gina Bacar. And then I've seen her like Hilton Head, and she was just in this Cleveland thing too. So yeah, and every time I just, it's wonderful to see somebody again who is pursuing this career too, so.
It's a tireless commitment, and I admire the fact that you are on this journey. It's definitely incredibly gratifying. I think it's a privilege to be an artist in many ways. We have really a great gift given to us just to be able to play music, right? And especially piano music is so exciting and amazing, really. We're very lucky. And it's wonderful that you are on this journey. So it's a beautiful journey, really. So I want to open up our discussion to our audience. And if any of you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask anything you want of Priscila or Michael Barron, for that matter. He's here with us. So, anyone? Francis? Yeah, Daniela, is that the...
Yeah, I know. I'm not even, apologies. This time I'm usually on my way to doing things, so I'm not, I can turn on the camera, but it's nothing exciting to see me driving while I'm listening to you. But maybe that shows my dedication.
Thank you for tuning in.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for, of course, as always, I look forward to these meetings. It's very enjoyable and very refreshing to learn new things and meet new people. And I just wanted to thank actually Priscila for sharing her story, And immediately it made me think of, I just realized I have another friend who is your compatriot. One of my friends is married to Enrique Bernardo, who is also a Peruvian pianist. And listening to your story, yeah, he's a pianist and a singer. They now live in Germany. And listening to your story, it gives me a much better insight and understanding of what it meant to become a classical musician, growing up in a culture like what you're explaining. And just the only thing I can say, I'm sorry, is I just realized I should have shared this link with them. So maybe Milana, start recording those. Maybe we can share them with them. Oh, great. Okay, maybe I will try to figure out a way to share it with them. Yes, I don't know if you know him, and he actually maybe mentioned other people that are also from your country in the Miami area. Hope they're all supporting you and watching you. No particular question, just really a special thank you for sharing your story. In many ways, I can find something of a learning experience and a resonance of, as Milana said, with our own stories of immigration and following this musical passion. So really, really thank you. And what is next for you? Maybe a question like that, if that is even appropriate, if anybody knows what is next now.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, yes, I do know actually, Enrique. Peruvian musicians, we kind of know everybody in the classical music scene. So as far as what's next for me, I'm supposed to start school. There's still a lot up in the air with, how they're going to open or whether they're going to open and all these questions. I was supposed to, they rescheduled the list competition because the organizers just don't want to give up. And so they're scheduling it now for November. But as you know, the future is very, very uncertain, and it's just changing all the time. So if the travel restrictions permit, hopefully that will be one thing that can happen. And beyond that, I have some concerts scheduled for 2021, starting at the beginning of the year, and we're just staying hopeful that by then there will be some kind of, at least some form of in-person concert, even with, limited seating and all those, whatever restrictions there may be.
Oh, okay. Well, I cross fingers for that. And actually listening to this, I remembered perhaps one more question, if I may. Trying to place myself in the shoes of an international student, being independent, supporting yourself, and working, studying and working, hopefully, in a foreign country. In my case, as a string player, when I was a student, I was able to work in part-time orchestras or, teach lessons in order to pay the rent and make ends meet while you're studying and all this. How does that actually work for a pianist, I wonder?
Well, there's unfortunately restrictions are very strict on how much we really should be working as international students. So theoretically, we're allowed to do a part-time job, only like up to 20 hours a week. And most of the people I know will get some kind of teaching assistantship, which is already 20 hours a week. So, and then they cover your tuition and they give you a stipend to live from that. When I was an undergraduate student, I didn't have an assistantship. So I played as principal keyboard for the Southwest Florida Symphony Orchestra. And also I accompanied a lot. But to me, probably competitions and concerts were some of my main ways of help. And I was very lucky that I had scholarships, really good scholarships throughout my entire education. So I didn't have to get a loan or anything like that. Also, we cannot get a loan as an international student.
Yeah. Thank you. You touched one more magic word in what you were saying. You said you do a lot of accompanying, right? Or collaboration with other instruments, right?
Yes.
So that is, if Milana allows me, I would like to ask how Priscila feels when she performs as a soloist, and then she sometimes needs to collaborate with others. How is this? I think it's kind of a sensitive subject in the world of pianists, because sometimes it's not every musician appreciates another musician, but sometimes in the perspective of an audience, when they see a pianist as a soloist, they think, oh, well, that's a real person. And when they play with another instrument, it's, oh, they're just the accompanist. And of course, we don't want that. We actually think both of us are very passionate about establishing the clarity of what that means. So what does it mean for you? How does it feel to participate in those occasions? And is there anything we can do to, to give the right image to the audience of what it means, to keep the respect that this is just because you're playing a supportive line to another instrument. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's secondary, but it's no, it doesn't mean that it should take away the respect and all the qualifications of the pianist.
If I may, maybe highlight a piece like Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is anything but accompanying.
Exactly. Well, for everybody that knows the piece, it is pretty much like Rachmaninoff concerto with a line of cello. We all love it, but case in point, yes, that's just the clarification we're trying to make. So, Priscila, how's your experience with that, and what do you think can we do to install proper appreciation within the audience?
Well, actually, I recently, one of my classes was social aspects and sociology of music. And my large paper was precisely on this topic of collaborative pianists. And, there's a long history of sometimes, even now, sometimes they won't even put the name of the pianist in the program. I recently went to a concert of...
You've got to be kidding me.
No, I'm totally serious. Maxim Bengarov played Franck Sonata, Brahms Sonata, Beethoven Sonata, and I had no idea who the pianist was going to be until the concert. And actually, I debated whether to go to the concert if I didn't know who the pianist is, because the pianist plays a bigger role. Even a great violinist would not make a great performance of the Franck Sonata by himself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, to me, collaboration is a whole set of different abilities. Mm-hmm. To some extent, it does not overlap with solo playing. I know many great solo pianists who cannot do collaborative work well. It's kind of a gift of being able to depend on other people and have other people depend on you. And so it's a really wonderful thing, and one of the best gifts that we have as musicians, to be able to make music with other people. And again, I know certain people who have a special gift for collaboration, and you know who those people are, because everybody wants to play with them, because they make the other instrumentalist or singer just feel safe and grounded when you go out to perform with them. And the role really cannot be underestimated. So to me, I feel like I have somewhat of that ability to make music with others, and I certainly can follow them anywhere. So that's why I accompanied so much, because especially for students, you become kind of like the rock that they can trust on whatever happens in the performance. And then, once you do collaborations with artists, professional artists, like when I play with Dr. Barron, or last year I did a Peruvian tour with the viola teacher from the University of Miami. And we actually played the Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata, but with her on the viola. And then it's a very different experience, because you're feeding off what the other person is doing, and then you're responding to that, and they're responding to you, and it's a circle. And it's just wonderful. Yeah, it's a very, very different experience, I think.
Yeah. So is it appropriate to ask to have, if somebody only does collaborative piano versus just solo piano, would you say that's a separate title? Do you always introduce yourself as a pianist, or can you introduce yourself as a collaborative pianist? I mean, I'm frankly asking, what is the current status and perception in musicians' mind? Because I grew up being explained that by my pianist in high school, how sensitive that was and what is the appropriate term. And I think the terminology is changing. 20, 30 years ago, they used to say accompanying. And then like, no, accompanying is not right. Now it's collaborating. And now people tell me, well, collaboration doesn't sound good either. I'm like, well, what is it? What do we call it now? Somebody help me.
Yeah, I think, well, to me, like, it doesn't bother me as much, the naming. I do think that it's very important to teach, especially students who are, instrumentalists or singers, how to interact with their pianists, whatever they call them. Just the line of respect and of acknowledging their work, bow together when you go in, bow together when you go out, always thank them, and be on time to rehearsals, be prepared to rehearsals, and all those things I think are very important, because to me at least it makes a huge difference how I feel when I perform. If I feel appreciated, I will do whatever I need to do to make that person sound the best they can. And thankfully I've always encountered those types of situations more than kind of careless students. So I think, to me, the term is not as important. I think collaborative is still pretty well accepted. And there's also people like vocal coaches that specialize on playing with singers or playing with different particular instruments. In general, if you don't know what to call them, just say pianist.
I think that's the easiest, probably. You don't need to think about it too much. If I may, there are two
Thank you, ladies.
here, and they have questions. And Paloma, who is a piano student, Daniela, if you can mute yourself, because there's a background. Thank you. Paloma, who is a piano student, she has a question in the chat. She asked, did you go to Interlochen summer camp or year-round academy? And what was your favorite ice cream at the Melody Freeze?
So I went only to the summer camp, and I went twice. The first time I went, there were 2 other Peruvians with me. And the second time I went, there were 7 Peruvians with me there. And most of them ended up having really wonderful careers in the States. And I didn't stay for the academy for several reasons. First of all, because in Peru, like when I was 14, I was almost done with high school. And if I had come, I would have had to redo several years of high school. And I did not want to do that. So yeah, but as far as the ice cream, I don't quite remember. That's the soft serve, right? I think that you could do vanilla or chocolate or swirl. And I think I just liked all of them. I still do.
All right. And Grace Angel, who is another piano student here in Collier County, she's asking, how long does it take to learn a piece on an average, a piece of music?
So from reading the notes to kind of having it hanging together, usually about a week. But that's the beginning always to me. So like a lot of people think that like you work on it until you memorize it, but that actually is the first step. Then you live with the piece and you explore all the possibilities, and then when you perform it for the first time, that's kind of the beginning of your relationship with the piece. And so yeah, but from just the notes, usually about a week or 2, depending on how big the piece is.
You must have amazing sight reading skills.
Actually, I have very good sight reading, but what I do best is memory. So usually by the second or third time, I already remember because I analyze how it's kind of structured.
Well, that maybe we can have a separate session where you can kind of tell our students, the process that you go through of learning a piece, because I think it would be very interesting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think, part of it was also that when I was a kid, I was so curious that I just went on site reading everything and listening to different things. And then you start forming patterns where you can recognize something as soon as you see it. So, and another side is listening to music. The more you listen, the more you're likely to remember, and the more you're likely.
Do you remember, even now, do you listen mostly to piano music, or you listen to a lot of orchestral music? What it is that you listen to?
I listen to everything. I have a tradition of Bach vocal works, generally in the mornings, and especially on Sundays. Yeah, I went through a period where I listened to like mostly piano, and there's a point where you can only listen to Rachmaninoff concerti so many times, and then you kind of need a break. And so yeah, what I'm trying to do now is by composer, like when I play a piece, I try to re-explore the works of that composer by listening to different interpretations, different conductors of the symphonies of that particular person.
Have you found your, I don't know if you know about, on YouTube, there's Netherlands Bach Society. Mm-hmm. Have you heard the recordings?
Yes. So they have this project, The Complete Bach, which I think is really cool, like all the works and all the instruments and like different performances of each. One of my favorite conductors for Bach is Masaki Suzuki, and he has the Japan Bach Collegium. Just fantastic orchestra, fantastic chorus, and he has recorded pretty much all of, cantatas, all the works of Bach.
That's great. Anybody else has questions? I see a few people just are arriving just now, so I don't know if there was a time difference.
Join in.
Okay.
I think the time difference, I didn't clarify that we are 1 hour ahead of Peru, so I should have put that on the...
So maybe we can have like a separate session now going forward with Peruvian fans. Or you can start your own Zoom chat. Priscila, I want to thank you for everything. Anybody else has any thoughts, ideas, questions, comments? Everybody's silent today. All right. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in, for joining me, for doing this wonderful recording. I'm glad we got a chance to do that project with you. And I'm sure we will see each other more often. So now that you're in this area at the moment, so.
Yes, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. I've been looking forward to playing in the Faziolis. I love Fazioli. I discovered them in Europe, and whenever I get a chance, I choose to perform in them. And just, thank you to everybody for watching the concert. I hope you enjoyed the combination of, Albéniz and Brahms, like very different perspectives of music. So, and I hope to collaborate with you again in some other future projects.
Sounds good, and make sure you reach out to your fans in Peru and and let them know about the time difference.
Yes, I will. I'm sure they will.
Thank you so much, Priscila. All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.